What is going on, guys? This is Crowsin, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build. This is my pure Beastmaster Ranger. So Beastmasters are a lot of fun to use in this game. They just require at least 11 points into the subclass to really get anything out of it, because that's when the pets get their major upgrades, and that's when you could build around a pet. And I wanted to make this build kind of unique and creative, so I went for a strength-based ranger that's going to be fighting right alongside of their pets. So no ranged attacks with this build. I feel like the other ranger subclasses fit a ranged attacker more, whereas a Beastmaster is better suited to be a strength-based character, and it has a lot of different moves where you could synergize really well with your pets while you are in melee range. So yeah, let's get into making a Beastmaster Ranger. So starting with our ability points, we're going to want to go with 17 Strength, 14 Dexterity, 15 Constitution. I also lowered Intelligence down to 8, and I kept Wisdom and Charisma at 10. For skill proficiencies, we want to go with Athletics, Animal Handling, and Insight. For favorite enemy, the best thing to do here would be to go for Ranger Knight. This way you get heavy armor proficiency right at level 1, which I recommend that you wear heavy armor with this build because it's just going to fit the vibe of a melee ranger. And then for Natural Explorer, we're going to go with Beast Tamer. This will allow you to cast Find Familiar without expending a spell slot, and we're going to be casting a Raven with this, so that way the Raven can blind an enemy, so that will give you advantage on your next attack. Now we could take a look at our level path going all the way up to level 12, and at level 2 we get 2 spells. This is where you want to go with Hunter's Mark and Longstrider. Hunter's Mark is going to be used like 95% of the time on this build. It's going to be your main ability. Not only is it going to give you increased damage on whatever enemy has Hunter's Mark, but every single one of your pets is going to deal increased damage on whatever enemy is marked with Hunter's Mark. So it is very important that you cast this all of the time on this character. And then Longstrider is just going to give you an increased movement speed, which is going to be super beneficial because we're not going to be using any ranged attacks with this character. And then for our fighting style, we are going to go with Defense to get an extra +1 bonus to our armor class. At level 3, we gain an additional spell, and at this point, I recommend that you go for Speak with Animals. After all, we are a Beastmaster Ranger, so I think it's vital to have this early, and then just pick Beastmaster for your subclass. So at level 4, we get our first feat, and you could either go for Ability Improvement and get your Strength and Constitution up to even numbers, or you could go for Great Weapon Master, because this is really going to give you a massive damage boost at level 4, but you only want to use this when you have advantage. And the good news is that between not only your Find Familiar pet, which you can summon the Raven and blind an enemy, but your main Raven pet will also be able to blind enemies too, so you're going to have plenty of options in order to gain advantage, and that will make a Great Weapon Master a really good feat to get at level 4. At level 5, we get an additional spell, and I would just recommend to go with Ensnaring Strike here. At level 6, we get an additional favorite enemy and Natural Explorer. So for favorite enemy, we're going to go with Bounty Hunter. So this way, the enemies will have disadvantage on their saving throw whenever we use Ensnaring Strike. And then for Natural Explorer, we're going to go with Wasteland Wanderer Fire. Level 7 gets us an additional spell, and for this one, I recommend going with Silence. This will completely shut down any kind of spellcasters that you may come across. And at level 8, we get our second feat. If you went with Great Weapon Master at level 4, then at this point you could go with Strength and Constitution and get those up to 18 and 16. If you went for Ability Improvement at level 4, then now is your time to get Great Weapon Master. At level 9, we get access to level 3 spells, and I would recommend going with Conjure Barrage here. If you guys followed my Hunter build, you'll know that I really didn't like this for a Hunter because Hunters have an AoE ranged move in Volley, which is way better than Conjure Barrage. but Beastmasters don't have any AoE attacks, so that is where Conjure Barrage can really play a role here. And if you have more than 2 enemies, this could really add on the damage for a nice AoE attack. I would only recommend using this when there are 3 or more enemies, otherwise just stick to your main attack because you can't get an extra attack when you cast Conjure Barrage. At level 10, we get an additional favorite enemy in Natural Explorer, so we're just going to go with Keeper of the Veil here, and then also Wasteland Wanderer Cold. This way you get some nice resistances, right? Now we got cold resistance and we have fire resistance from earlier. Level 11 gives us our last spell, and I recommend going with Plant Growth here. This will just give you an extra spell to control the battlefield. And finally, at level 12, we get our last feat. This is where you want to go right back into ability improvement and get your strength up to 20. Now, once we get to level 12 and once we get some really good gear later on in the game, we could respec our character and completely change the feats that we go for, which will better enhance your character once you're at level 12. So I will go into more about that once we get into the gear. But going from level 1 to level 12, this is a really good path to take. So next up, we're going to take a look at the pets because the pets are a real important part about being a Beastmaster. So we're going to start out with the bear. The bear gets Goading Roar, which is a nice AoE taunt for 2 turns. However, it does require a wisdom save, so it's not totally reliable. They also gain Honeyed Paws, which will allow them to disarm their target, and then on the consecutive hit, they can make the target fall prone if they're not holding a weapon. So it sounds great in theory. The problem is that bears have such a low chance to hit that getting 2 consecutive hits with Honeyed Paws is going to be somewhat rare. They also have an ability called Ursine Reinforcements, which will allow them to summon an additional bear to fight alongside of them. However, you're not locked into using a bear whenever you have this ability. You could just dismiss the bear, summon something else, and still keep the additional bear. So I would probably rank the bear towards the lower end of the tier when we're taking a look at all of the pets. Next up, we could take a look at the boar, and the boar has some pretty nice abilities. They have Boar Charge, which means that they can charge forward and attack any enemies in their way and possibly knock them prone. It does require a strength save, so that's probably the only downside to Boar Charge. Otherwise, I would have them ranked probably in the highest tier possible. But they also have some other pretty cool, neat abilities. They can Enrage, and then on the following turn, they can use an extra attack as a bonus action, which is pretty neat. So they're going to have a little bit more damage that way. They also have Kick Up Muck, which will slather a target in mud and slow them down. This can affect your allies though, so you have to be wary of that. But yeah, I would say that boars are not bad. I would definitely rank them higher than a bear, but there are some better pets out there. Next up is the wolf spider, and the wolf spider has a lot of utility, probably more than any other pet. Their main attack can poison a target, and then they also can cast webs all across the battlefield each turn that will last for 10 turns. So not only can it enweb an enemy when you initially cast this, but if they're running inside the webs, they can also get enwebbed that way, which will grant you advantage. It can affect your allies as well, so you have to be very cautious when you use this and where you use it. Same thing applies for Bursting Brood, another really neat ability that you can use once per long rest. It can affect your allies as well. And then they have the Cocoon ability, which can trap a creature in your web to cocoon it, which will basically incapacitate an enemy for 3 turns. It does require a dex save as well, just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that the spiders are really good. They just have a lot of abilities that could affect your allies too, and because of that, I wouldn't rank them the highest, but they are pretty good pets. Next up is the Dire Raven, and I think that the ravens are the best pet in the game. At level 11, they could fly anywhere, and wherever they fly, as many times as they want to fly per turn, they can cast a darkness cloud which will blind enemies, and that'll synergize really well with our character because they could fight in the darkness, have advantage every time. They also have Ren Vision, which can blind enemies that they attack, and that way if an enemy moves out of the darkness cloud, they can still be blinded if you have Ren Vision on them. And they can also summon 2 additional ravens to fight alongside of them, and they can also curse targets. However, the curse does require a wisdom save, and you're not really going to hit that too many times. I think that the weakness with the raven is if you're ever fighting an enemy that cannot be blinded. In that case, you probably want to swap out to a different pet, but otherwise, the raven is probably going to win out 99% of the time. And finally, we have the wolf, and I think the wolf is the most interesting pet here because they're really the most badass pets, but they're probably not the best pet, but you could still get by with using one. They have some pretty neat abilities. They have Lunging Bite, which can knock a target prone, does require a strength save, but you can gain advantage that way for your Beastmaster Ranger for their Great Weapon Master attacks. They also have one of the coolest moves in the game, which is Lupin Slash, which is a nice AoE move where they're basically slashing a sword around in their mouth. And yeah, it's pretty badass. I really love that move a lot. And their main attack can possibly turn a target septic, which is just a disease. Not really too significant there. I would just worry about knocking enemies prone and using the AoE attack. So they're pretty basic. But yeah, they are a lot of fun to fight right alongside of a wolf. I mean, I would say they're probably one of the better pets. I would probably rank them in the mid tier, but you could definitely get by with just using a wolf in this game. So next up is taking a look on how to gear our Beastmaster Ranger. So I'm going to quickly hover over each item here so that way you guys can see what I'm using. And the main thing that you want to take from here is that you're still going to be wearing heavy armor at level 12. So we're going to go for Armor of Persistence. You could also go for Helldusk Armor. That will give you a 21 armor class if you don't want to use Armor of Persistence. Any two-hand weapon will work here. And then you also want to have an item that will allow you to see in the dark and not be blinded. And that is where Steel Watcher Helmet comes into play. Ideally, Helldusk Helmet would be better here, but this item is currently bugged where you can't cast Hunter's Mark while you're in the darkness, so it basically is irrelevant for a Beastmaster at this time. You could also go for an early game ring, such as Eversight Ring, and probably swap out Caustic Band here. That way you could see in the darkness that way as well, and I believe you get that item in Act 2. The other thing here is Gauntlets of Heal Giant Strength and Amulet of Greater Health. Once you obtain these in Act 3, that is when you could respec your character, and you could lower Strength and Constitution all the way down to 8, raise up your Dexterity to 16, Intelligence to 12, Wisdom to 16, and Charisma to 14, and you never have to spend an ability improvement while you level up your feats. So at level 4, you could go for a Great Weapon Master. At level 8, you could go for Sentinel, and then at level 12, you could go for Savage Attacker, and that is basically how you're going to rock this character in the end game. But yeah, other than that, the Deadshot Bow is mainly just here for an improved critical chance, and these rings really add up the damage on your melee attacks. And Savage Attacker is also going to stack with Strange Conduit Ring. It's also going to stack with your Hunter's Mark. So Savage Attacker is somewhat beneficial for a Beastmaster Ranger, and not only a Smite Paladin. So yeah, that is basically how you want to gear your character. So I hope that gives you a good guiding point. So now for the last part of this video, we could take a look at a combat showcase featuring the Beastmaster. So the first thing that you always want to do when you start a fight off is cast Hunter's Mark. And ideally, you would probably want to cast this on a boss, but you could also cast it on the enemy that's closest to your pets, because your pets are going to attack whatever's closest to them. So we could cast Hunter's Mark right here. And usually you'd want to attack this enemy as well because you're going to get the bonus damage with Hunter's Mark. But all of your pets are going to get that bonus damage too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to try to get a nice AoE attack on all 5 of these enemies. But before I do that, let's go over to our Raven and let's start blinding up the battlefield. So the first thing that you want to do is cast Dash as a bonus action because now you could really fly everywhere after that. So now you could go into Fly, we could blind this enemy, then we could go over here and we could blind these 2 archers. And we could keep going, we could blind these 2. And then we could go over here and blind this guy as well. And I might as well attack this guy while I'm here. So we will go with Beak Attack, but you can also go with Ren Vision here, so that way if they do decide to leave this fog, which they are, they're still going to be blinded. So in this case, I'm going to go for Ren Vision. And so now they're blinded for 2 turns, so even if they leave this darkness fog, they're still going to be blinded and you'll have the advantage. So now I'm just going to go for a regular attack, so that way this one has a little bit more damage. And for the last part, I'm just going to move this character out just a little bit more, so that way my Raven doesn't get caught in the AoE attack. Alright, so now we go back into our main character, and here's where we could have a lot of fun. So let's go like right here, and my hope is that I could hit all 5 of these with Conjure Barrage melee weapons. So we will see. I know this archer is kind of like hiding behind these crates, so let's go right here. And yeah, as you guys could see, it could really put a lot of damage on all of these enemies. I would only recommend using Conjure Barrage when there are 3 or more enemies, because you can't get an extra attack whenever you cast Conjure Barrage. So it's really only useful when you got a whole group of enemies that are stacked up. Also, before I end this turn, I do want to move into the darkness, and that way if, say, this archer wants to try to run away, I'm going to be able to get a opportunity attack off on him and keep him here with Sentinel. So now it is our Mini Raven's turn, and the Mini Raven really isn't going to do much damage, but they can actually blind targets and you can gain advantage that way as well. So only thing you got to do is hit the enemy, and so I think I have like a really low chance of hitting this target, only 35%. So I'm going to try to test my luck over here. I'm going to go over here and just try to blind this guy. Got a much higher percentage here. And yeah, even for a level 1 health Raven, you could really get a lot of utility out of one. So now it's our turn again, and we could basically just repeat that same process. So none of these enemies decided they wanted to leave the darkness, so we have advantage on all 3 of them. So this is going to pair up perfectly with Great Weapon Master. So I might as well just take this guy out with 7 health, that way we could get the bonus attack. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's toggle Great Weapon Master back on. And let's go ahead and use the bonus attack on this enemy. And we took that enemy out, so now we could use our last attack on this guy. And he has like 5 health left. So now what I'm probably going to do is move over here. Since this enemy is bunched up around all of my pets, so if this enemy tries to attack any of them, I should be able to get an opportunity attack thanks to Sentinel. So let's try to move close as we can. And now we could start attacking with our Raven, so might as well just finish this guy off. And now we could go ahead and blind both of these targets. So remember to always use dash first. You'll be able to cover more ground that way. Let's go ahead and blind this guy. And now we could go ahead and blind this archer. And I'm also going to use Ren Vision here So that way if he does decide to leave, he will still be blinded. And yeah, that's perfect. So we could go ahead and end the turn now. So now we're in our third turn, and we should be able to finish everything in this turn. So I'm going to start out with the Raven. I'm going to dash and blind any enemy that isn't blinded already. So both of these enemies are blinded. So we could go over here. We could blind this archer. And then I'm going to travel right over here. And we'll go ahead and blind this guy and attack him. And so now the remaining 3 enemies are all blinded. So I should be able to just go back into my main character and finish off each one of them. So let's go ahead and just use a main hand attack. Now I'm going to use my Great Weapon Master bonus attack for this guy. And then finally, go over here. And yeah, that is how you basically fight with a Beastmaster. So I hope you guys enjoyed this build. And yeah, Beastmaster Rangers are a lot of fun to use. Specifically, strength-based Beastmaster Rangers. Fighting alongside of your pet in melee range just creates some really nice synergies between you and your pets. And if you guys have any other builds you want to see, let me know. And I will see you in the next video.